The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
And welcome in, everybody. Thank you all for joining us here on this Thursday evening as we get ready for NFL kickoff. Less than an hour away is DJ from the High Low Sports Podcast, and today we're going to do something a little bit fun here. If any of you have paid attention, Belly Up Sports has done a recent fantasy league. You can go and check out our previous stream to see who all is in there and see their teams. We decided to do a little bit of head-to-head fun this week, and we got my co-host from the High Low Sports Podcast, Kelsey, and Josh Mahler from Rising to the Occasion Podcast. We get the lucky benefit of going head-to-head this week in fantasy football, so we decided to have a little bit of fun today. We're going to do a fantasy football blind reveal game, see how well you know your teams, and if you could redo it, what you would do. So, Kelsey, Josh, thank you all for joining, and I think this should be a fun one.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I don't know if we have. I don't know if we can call it a pleasure because now we get to open out the season with an embarrassing loss in week one. Now that Travis Kelce goes down, but you know what? It's okay. It's something about the long haul, not necessarily the short haul. It just might include a punishment here shortly.
Well, we don't have to get too far into that now. It's a marathon, not a sprint, but there you might have to. It's kind of like when sprinters chug the milk along the way, then throw up throughout. There might be some puking throughout the marathon, so we'll have to see how it goes. But as we alluded to, what we're going to do is we're going to have a blind reveal. We're going to put some stats up for positions, and both of these guys are going to choose which one they like, and we're going to see who ends up with the better team as we go along. So what better place to start than with the quarterback? So we're going to go and put up the reveal now. Quarterback number one, and we have behind door number one, total fantasy points last year, 378. Total yards, 4,461. Total touchdowns, 35. Projected fantasy points for this season, 358.97. So quarterback one, that is their numbers. For quarterback number two, total fantasy points, 239.2. Total yards, 37.89. Total touchdowns, 27. And they're expected to get an uptick in fantasy points. It looks like at a projected 263.292. So behind, we have quarterback number one, quarterback number two. We're going to go and start with you, Kelsey. Which quarterback are you taking?
I'm going to say quarterback one in this case. I think it's a safe bet here. Although I will say, if my guess is right about who quarterback two is, I think that 263 is pretty low for his season projection. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it much higher. But I think statistically, I gotta go quarterback one. I feel like I don't have any choice in the matter.
Very interesting. All right, so Josh, which one are you taking? Mine, door number one or door number two?
See, I want to say door number two because I'm predicting and I'm looking at that thinking that number two is my quarterback. But realistically, looking at the stats, obviously you pick QB number one. I think QB number one has the better stats all the way around. There's not a single category that QB doesn't win in this. So obviously number one.
And you know what? That will go in the favor of the High Low Sports Podcast. As quarterback number one was Jalen Hurts, with quarterback number two is Aaron Rodgers. So as everyone kind of alluded to, though, it feels like Aaron Rodgers' projections and last year's numbers could be exceeded pretty comfortably now that he's in a new environment with some not first-year receivers and an explosive one in Garrett Wilson and a good running back field. So that'll be 1 point for High Low Sports Podcast. But from here, I think it's going to get a little more interesting and a little closer. We're now going to move on to the running backs. And taking a look behind door number one for running backs, total fantasy points last year, 254.4. Total yards, 1,764. That is total yards rushing and receiving combined. Can't give it away by showing exact rushing and exact receiving. Total touchdowns, same story. We got 13. Projected fantasy points, 241.08. And then for running back number two, fantasy points last year, 213.9. Total yards, 1,139. Total touchdowns, 17. And projected fantasy points, 124.1. So Josh, we'll go and let you lead the way. Running back number one or running back number two?
Yeah, I think based on those stats, I think the only thing I really prefer for running back number two was just the total touchdowns from, but I honestly, I think everything else kind of leans towards running back number one. And this one's kind of tricky because there's so many running backs on the team. I'm not really sure which one is which exactly. So I can probably pick one of them that it's not on my team. But I'm going to go with running back number one.
All right, so running back number one getting the first vote. Kelsey, you are up. Running back number one, running back number two.
That's tough. Because the touchdowns, it really, really puts that in the favor of running back too. I mean, it almost makes up for the lack of yardage there. But I gotta say, the yardage in the air for number one is the total yardage, 600 more yards, pretty impressive. But we're playing fantasy football, so I got to go touchdowns, right? That's going to be my game winner. So I got to go running back two here in this situation.
All right. Well, it looks like we got a split between running back 1 and running back 2. So it looks like the only way we can fully settle this one would be with a trivia question, it feels like, because I don't know what better way to do that. And so I'm gonna try and reach deep into my bag of tricks here. Let's go and just take a look here. Let's see.
I'm worried about this. This was my least favorite part of this entire thing is when DJ comes up with trivia questions.
You know what? I'm not going to pull ones out of the depth of my brains. I'm going to try and pull one fantasy football related just to make it so it's not too ridiculous. So we're going to fantasy football. We're talking about running backs. So we're going to go and pick one for running backs. I want to know who was the 5th highest fantasy scoring running back last year in PPR under PPR rules. So we're looking at the 5th highest scoring running back. And Josh, I'm going to let you go ahead and pick first.
Man, I gotta go through the list of running backs for last year. See, I think in total, I don't know. I'm gonna go with maybe Dalvin Cook. I feel like that's a decent pick right there, right around the middle of the top. I'm gonna go Dalvin Cook.
Cool. Dalvin Cook and Kelsey. I'm going to go and let you take a shot. Who are you going to say is the 5th highest scoring running back of last year?
God. I mean, I want to say like Austin Eckler, but I feel like he was number 1, and I feel like CMC was 2. Derrick Henry was out of the top 10. Jonathan Taylor, 7 or 8, I believe. Oh God, yeah, like this is really how it feels. You know what? Oh. My brain just shut off. So let's just go JT, Jonathan Taylor.
Well, unfortunately, JT did not make the top 10, but Derrick Henry did at number 4. So if you'd have picked Derrick Henry, you would have won this one. But JT was well outside the top 20, where Dalvin Cook was at 11.
Oh, the injury. Yeah.
So Dalvin Cook was a little closer.
Number 5 was Saquon Barkley with the PPR.
Ooh, okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about him being in the top there. I like that.
I wasn't either.
So you were so close. You would have had Derrick Henry or pretty much every other name you listed except for JT. You
was I right? Was it Austin Eckler was 1 and 2 was CMC?
To under PPR rules, yep, that is how they were. Initially when it was standard, they had Austin Eckler at 5. So I was like, hold on. That's why it took me a minute there to look it up. But so that will put 1 point in favor of Josh and rising to the occasion. So we are tied 1-1 via tiebreaker there. We're now going to go over to our second running backs. Since it is fantasy football, we do have multiple sets of running backs. Behind door number 1, we got 189.60 fantasy points last year, with total yards 1,500, total touchdowns 7, with a projected fantasy total this year of 172.96. Running back number 2 with 143 fantasy points last year, 931 total yards, 8 total touchdowns, 116.58 total points. And I should mention too, these are under standard rules where they're total fantasy points and projected points, not PPR points. So if one of them could be a receiving threat, we won't know based on these projections. So Josh, I'm going to let you go first on this one. Running back number 2, running back number 1, which one are we looking at?
I think just by total yards there, it looks like running back 1 really runs away with it, plus the projected fantasy points. And then, running back 2 is only up 1 in total touchdowns. So I'm going to go running back 1.
All right, so we got 1 for running back 1. Kelsey, running back 1, running back 2. How are we feeling?
I'm going running back 1 as well. I'm not going to make that mistake twice. I think I think this is a situation where, 6 more points for 1 extra touchdown does not equal the 600 yards difference there. The 25 points you can get, from that. So that's running back 1 easily takes this one.
All right, running back 1 is the decision. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that is DeAndre Swift. So that is going to be another point for rising to the occasion. Aaron Jones was running back number 2, who had the touchdowns, just didn't quite have as many yards this year as well, too. And most of them he got were through the air as well. So that's going to.
So wait, was the last running backs, was that Jamal Williams and Nick Chubb?
Oh, yes. My apologies. I thought I mentioned that. So the last ones were Nick Chubb and Jamal Williams as well. So Nick Chubb was running back 1. Jamal Williams was running back 2.
Okay, no, that's what I thought it was. I couldn't figure out exactly who running back 1 was, but that makes sense that it was Nick Chubb.
That's exactly what I was looking at too. I was trying to figure out which running backs it could have been, and I figured running back 1 was Nick Chubb just based on the stats. But
I know the 17 total touchdowns about Jamal Williams. I've been spouting that all off season. That's the only reason I know that's true.
Exactly. And then this one was DeAndre Swift and Aaron Jones. So right now, after the 2 running backs have gone through, we now have a lead for rising to the occasion, but Now we're going to head over to the pass catchers. Now we're going to start with receiver ones. Looking at door number one, total fantasy points last year, 152, 1,220 yards, a total of 5 touchdowns, with a projected fantasy points of 131.84. Behind door number two, we got fantasy points last year at 159.6, total yards 1,196, total touchdowns at 7, with a projected 142.64. So pretty balanced across the board for this one. 6 and 1 and half a dozen the other. You know what, Kelsey? You're a little bit behind on this one, so I'm gonna let you go first. Receiver 1 or receiver 2?
Oh man, that's tough because those are about as neck and neck as they get there. I mean, look, pure statistics wise, which is what fantasy is at the end of the day, receiver 2 seems like a good bet. I have a sneaky suspicion receiver 1 is actually a number 1 targeted receiver. That just for some reason wide receiver 2 just has that nod over him. I don't know why that might be, but I mean, yeah, I'm going to go touchdowns here in wide receiver 2 again. I'm just going to stick with what's gotten me to this point. I'm only losing by 1. It can't get worse, right?
All right, so we got 1 vote for receiver number 2. Josh, receiver number 1 or receiver number 2? What way are we leaning?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards Kelsey's thought process, but I think just overall, based on stats and seeing what I see in front of me, I'm just going to go with wide receiver number 2 because 2 more touchdowns and slightly higher in the projected fantasy points, for this year, and then total fantasy points last year just slightly ahead as well. So I think I'm going to stick with wide receiver number 2 on my thought process.
Well, behind door number 2, you will find a receiver with a Heisman Trophy in his award cases. That will be Devontae Smith.
Wait, no, that's not me.
Whereas behind door number 1, you were on the right track. It was the scariest of Terry's, Terry McLaurin, behind door number 1.
What I thought. Yeah.
Relatively
that
close
makes
stats.
sense.
Smith, just when you have Jalen Hurts at quarterback compared to Taylor Heineke and Carson Wentz, you can see where the difference makes there. But look out for Terry McLaurin this year with actual quarterback play and an offensive coordinator. But I digress. I will not.
That hurt me to see.
2 NFC East teams like that as well, I can only imagine. But I'm standing by it. Terry McLaurin, breakout season. Commanders, breakout season. But I won't go too deep into that because we got receiver number 2 to look at right now. Looking behind door number 1, 95.6 fantasy points last year, 523 yards, but 7 touchdowns, and projected to have a 122.66 fantasy points. A little bit of a breakout expected for the receiver number 1. Receiver number 2, 148.4 last year, 1,124 total yards, 6 total touchdowns. Expected to kind of match that at 132.36. So it's looking like a pretty even season with a breakout from receiver number 1. Josh, you can go and lead the way. Receiver number 1 or receiver number 2? Which door are we going with?
Man, I feel like I know who wide receiver number 1 is. Man, I don't know. I don't, if it's who I'm thinking it is, I'm not sure if I trust the total projection. So I'm going to go with wide receiver number 2. I think maybe that's a better pick there. Plus, just overall, I feel like based on what they had last season and projection, I'm just going to go wide receiver number 2.
So we got 1 for receiver number 2. Kelsey, receiver number 1, receiver number 2. How are we feeling?
Yeah, I don't like receiver number 1 because it's one of 2 players, and I don't like one of them for sure. The second player that I'm thinking it could be, though, I would love to have him on my team, and I don't know if I do. I'm not sure. I think wide receiver 2 is probably the safe pick. I think if I have 2, I think it is. I think this dude is just gets 1,000 yards every year type of dude, which I think might give it away who I think that is. So I'm going to go wide receiver 2 just for the safety side of it. But yeah, I feel like receiver 1 it depends on who it ends up being, but I think it's Jahan Dotson or Treylon Burks, but I'm going to go receiver 2 nonetheless.
Well, you were right with receiver number 2. That is Mike Evans, so that will be a point for the high-low sports team, finally getting out of the gutter a little bit there. And receiver number 1 is, in fact, Jahan Dotson, so that's why you could see the lower yardage because you missed 5 games, but still scored touchdowns, and those projected points are really high. So right now it is 3-2 in favor of rising to the occasion with Mike Evans getting high-low back on the board. Next, we're going to move to the tight ends, and tight ends, we changed the stats just a little bit. Because, as you know, one of our teams has Travis Kelce on it, so we didn't want to make it too bloody obvious with that. So we took out PPR and we took out yards. We're just looking at fantasy points and touchdowns right now. So total touchdowns 12 to 11, projected fantasy points 168 to 118. And by the way, too, with Travis Kelce's injury, that may or may not have played a part into these projected fantasy points today too. Won't give away what happened there, but. All right, Kelsey, back on the board. Tight end number 1 or tight end number 2? Which way are we leading?
I don't think we can go wrong with either one of our tight ends. I'm going to be completely honest about that. knowing who both of our tight ends are, or at least our starters are. I personally, I'm going to stick with tight end 1 because that's my gut feeling towards him. But I mean, I wouldn't hate it if tight end 2 is a dude too. Like yeah, either one works for me. But tight end 1 is who I'm going with here.
Yeah, very interesting. All right, Josh, tight end number 1, tight end number 2. Which door are we banging down?
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with tight end number 1 as well. I think I'm just looking at the tight ends on the list, and I just feel like that's probably the guy to go with.
That would be the safe bet. As tight end number 1 is Travis Kelce, in fact, himself. Very hard to hide it when you have those total fantasy points and projected fantasy points. That kind of gives it away. Number 2 is George Kittle, so not one to be reckoned with. The 11 touchdowns to close, but after that, we got ourselves now a 3-3 ball game.
Didn't realize he ended the season last year with 11 touchdowns. I got to be honest. I definitely thought it was like 8 or 9, not 11.
Him and Purdy had a weird connection. I remember that Seattle game where he had 2 in the first half. So I guess they clicked and it surprised all of us as well when he's out there. But now it's going to take us now into the defenses now as we are tied at 3 apiece and taking a look at the defense. Total fantasy points, 186 for defense number 1. They projected fantasy points at 139. Total fantasy points for defense number 2 at 107, but a projected 130. So expecting a little bit of a boost out of them. Josh, I'll let you go and lead the way. Defense number 1 or defense number 2?
I have a feeling like defense number 1 is my defense, so I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with defense number 1. Plus, just overall, the points there just kind of lean over towards their favor.
All right, so we got 1 for defense number 1. Kelsey, defense number 1, defense number 2. Which way are we leaning?
I'm also going defense number 1, but I'm not sure if it is. I think it might actually be our defense. If
Do you think it is?
Because the takeaways, I think because of the takeaways is
you
the
might be
reason
right.
it's so high.
You might be
But
right.
I mean, I don't know though, because the projected fantasy of 130 on the defense 2 is also making me think that's my team. That's my defense. So I mean, I'm going to go defense 1.
That's what kind of led me to believe maybe that's the Patriots, because I feel like Steelers had a lot of takeaways last year as well. So that's why I'm kind of leaning towards number 1.
I'm going to go defense 1 because like even projected 139, that's not a bad situation at all. And if they're giving you 186 last year, they're probably going to give you closer to 150 this year anyways. Mm-hmm. So yeah, defense 1 for me.
Well, defense number 1 is from New England. So the New England Patriots number 1. The Steelers at number 2. Not having TJ Watt last year, I think, is where you see that giant burst of projected as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I don't think anyone believes the Patriots will be quite as good last year, or they just hate that quarterback and offense situation. 6 and 1 and half a dozen the other, but that's very close one. So heading into the last and final round, that is the kickers. High-low sports with a 4-3 lead, and this is where I think it'll get pretty close here as well. Kicker number 1 last year with 143 fantasy points, projected at 136. Kicker number 2 with only 98 fantasy points last year, but projected to significantly outdo that at 141. So Kelsey, you hold the lead right now. Kicker number 1, kicker number 2. Which way?
I know who kicker number 2 is because I did a do not draft this guy segment in the kicker segment pretty recently, and I didn't even realize that he was going to be an option to pick here. I'm avoiding kicker 2 because he plays on such a good team. He's not going to kick that often. I'm going kicker 1 here in this situation.
So Josh, kicker number 1, kicker number 2, higher projected fantasy points for kicker number 2. Do you lean that way or do you go with the total fantasy points of last season?
I'm going with kicker number 2 just because I think that offense is going to score a lot, and that's why I think that kicker. And if you look at the total points, the way that the point scoring system is in this league, I think it kind of leans towards the kicker that's going to have a high scoring team. So I'm going to go kicker number 2 just because I'm with Kelsey. I don't disagree with them, but I do kind of lean that way, especially with the type of league that we have with you. You can earn more for longer kicks.
Okay.
That's fair. Right. That's a fair assessment.
Right, and you know what? Looking at it, kicker number 1 is Younghoe Koo, and kicker number 2 is Harrison Buckner. So a split right down the middle, which means we got ourselves one more tiebreaker. And you know what? I got to find myself a pretty good one for this one. So give me 1 second to just dig into my bag of tricks here. Let's see what sticks out as a really.
We talked about this a little bit during the draft, Josh, and while DJ's looking that up, I want to broach back on this. Your philosophy on kickers and defenses. Do you always stick with your kickers and defense, like once you draft them, or do you tend to segue and roll through the season as it just need them?
I always rotate kickers and defenses both, just because you're going to have 1 week where, like, honestly, this week I was looking at with the Steelers versus 49ers, and I don't really know if I really like that, or if I were to have maybe like Kansas City's defense, I would like Kansas City's defense if they're going against maybe I don't know if you can look around, maybe if they were going against I don't know, Minnesota or Tampa Bay or someone like that, I feel like I could pick that defense. But if this week Kansas City, I'm not going to pick them going against the Detroit Lions. So I like to swap those around. I don't usually stick with the same one throughout the season. If I have a defense that's constantly getting me good points, I might drop a player that I'm not too worried about losing over my defense. And then kickers, I feel like you can always kind of find a kicker somewhere in the waivers. So I always kind of rotate those around as needed.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same mentality. I think I run into the issue where there's always one I get attached to. Like especially it's usually a kicker. I'll just get attached to him for some unnecessary reason, and then never drop them. But I will say, like I think there's 2 kickers I think you can have that maybe you don't rotate out. Daniel Carlson being one of them, Justin Tucker obviously being the other. But outside of that, I think every other defense and every kicker, I think I'm more than open to rotate, except for maybe Evan McPherson, just because he has a soft spot in my heart for the way he got the Bengals to the Super Bowl.
All right, so we have ourselves a trivia question. We're going to set this up by one kicker last year had a highest scoring week of 23 points in a single given week. Pick which kicker that will be, and I'll give you the hint now. It's not Justin Tucker or Dan Carlson, the 2 leading scorers from last year. It's not either one of those as far as the kicker, but Josh, we'll go ahead and let you lead the way on this one too. You'll go ahead and pick who you think that kicker that scored 23, and how we'll break the ties if neither one of you gets it, which one is ever closer to that particular player in the overall ranking. So
Josh, said it was not PJ.
What was that?
You said it was not PJ Tucker?
It was not Justin Tucker or Daniel Carlson.
PJ. I don't know. I'm thinking
you're not going to make us guess all the kickers until we get there?
Nope, we're each just going to take one, and whoever gets closer to the overall total points, we'll go with that one. Otherwise,
that was last season.
Last year, in a single week, they had 23 points, which was the highest for any individual week by a kicker.
In a single week or a single game?
Single game, excuse me.
Okay. Because I could see a Sunday and Thursday coming back to back.
I'm not doing that kind of math. I'm just looking at a simple spreadsheet. I'm not going that deep.
That would have been tricky. Okay. That would have been a tricky little.
Yeah, I'm trying to cut DJ off. Let's see. You said 23 points.
23.
Man, I did not know that kickers were able to score that much, honestly. So
can I flash back to Rob Baronis with the Titans as my pick? Is that like that's a
man.
crazy, wow.
Yeah, that is really tough. I kind of, man, I'm trying to think. It's got to be a high scoring team, or at least a high scoring game. So I kind of want to go.
Yeah, maybe.
Man,
before he answers, can I ask a hint for both of us?
Okay.
Is it AFC or NFC?
That might give it away.
Okay, never mind then. Don't worry about it.
Just because I already killed off 2 AFC kickers as well. So if it is the AFC, then I'm eliminating Lob. You know what? There's your answer. It's an AFC kicker. There you go. I kind of just so it's an AFC kicker that's not Dan Carlson or Justin Tucker. So
okay, well, I'm gonna go Evan McPherson then. I feel like he's a good enough kicker. Where man, last year he didn't have a great year though. So I'm just gonna go there just because I can't really think of where else to go.
All right, so we got Evan McPherson. All right, Kelsey, who are you thinking?
I think actually Evan McPherson had like a 15 to 16 point week though last year. So it wouldn't surprise me if he had one good week.
I just now had another thought too, but I'll let you close it out.
Yeah. I appreciate that because I'm thinking AFC. Like I'm thinking it might be the flip side of it. It might be a team that's not that good. But I was also down to 2 kickers in my head. And the reason why I have to ask NFC or AFC is because one was NFC, one was AFC. I think I'm just going to stick with him. I'm going to go Tyler Bass with Buffalo.
Is that your final answer?
That's my final. God, now I'm hoping he maybe got 6 in a week at this point in time. Yeah, I'm going to go. He's my final answer.
All right, Josh, you had one more thought you want to throw in before I reveal?
Nope. Yeah, it was more or less trying to change my answer, but I'm just going to stick with Evan.
You may change your answer. I do permit this. There are no rules in this.
I'll stick with Evan just because I feel like if I change it, I'm going to be mad that I changed it. But
well, the good news I have for you is it wouldn't have mattered if you changed it because it was in fact Tyler Bass.
Okay.
It was Tyler Bass in week 11. He had 23 points. So Tyler Bass was the answer there, which means somehow High Low Sports comes from the depths of defeat to take the victory 5-3 off of pure dumb luck, honestly. But what we were looking forward to
we still have to win the fantasy matchup here, so I don't have to eat some hot chips or something.
And random fun fact, since we're talking about kickers, neither Justin Tucker or Daniel Carlson had a scoring week over 20. Brett Meyer did in week 11 as well. We also saw Young-Hoo Koo with a 20-pointer. Tyler Bass with his 23. Nick Folk with a 21. Evan McPherson, his high was 17, also in week 11, weirdly enough. So week 11 was very generous to kickers that week.
Nick Folk was my NFC guess, by the way.
I was thinking of jumping over to Koo. Just looking at, I was like, man, I kind of want to jump over and pick him too. But yeah, I guess Evan McPherson wasn't a bad bet.
Evan McPherson on the total scoring was sitting at number 19, whereas Young-Hoo Koo was 5 and Tyler Bass was 6. So if you wouldn't have guessed Tyler Bass, Young-Hoo Koo probably would have got you the win there as well.
Yeah.
Very, very close. So very close matchup, very fun, very interesting. Kelsey, you were able to walk away with a very slight edge. Do you have a victory speech or a future concession speech?
Yeah, it might be a future concession speech. Just remember this moment of sadness and despair when I lose this fantasy matchup to Josh this weekend. And just please provide mercy for whatever punishment comes from that.
Absolutely. And Kelsey, while we're here, go ahead and tell the people one quick moment where we could find you every week, where your show's at and where they can follow you.
Yeah, or you can find myself and our lovely host, the Brain, today. You can find us every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time live on YouTube, as well as Facebook and Twitch. You can find us audio-wise on any platform you listen to podcasts on the next day on Thursdays. And you can also check out Tier Tuesdays and our Fantasy Fridays as we go through the season. We're ranking fun things. We just did the offenses for all 32 teams on Tier Tuesday, and then fantasy football. I've taken the guys I'm fading, the guys that I'm flopping, and putting on a team together and going week by week and seeing exactly where I failed at on my pick'ems. So that way you can see with live interest exactly how bad I am at picking fantasy football sometimes.
You definitely don't want to miss that as well. And Josh, go ahead and let the people know where they can find you and when they can find you.
Yeah, I am the host of Rising to the Occasion. You can always find us on YouTube, all of social media and everything. We go live on Saturday morning at 8:30 a.m. Central Time. So that's 9:30 Eastern Time. We're going to be live from Midland University out at the north end zone. So I guess if anybody's in the area of Fremont, Nebraska, come on out and see us live there. Otherwise, you can catch it live on YouTube. Again, that's 8:30 a.m. Central, 9:30 Eastern. So you can check us out there. We also release everything on Tuesdays and Thursdays over on YouTube at 8:30 in the morning as well. So you can always check out national sports and stuff like that on there. Pretty much everything, all of our information is on rising2.com. So that's risingto.com.
Absolutely. Well, 2 wonderful places I highly recommend. Go subscribing and go checking them out as well, too. We appreciate you all for joining us here for Fantasy Football Blind Reveal Game. We'll see you all again next time.